Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Watch More Movies. My name is Josh, joined here by my brother Devon, and we are in the middle of our found footage month. We are reviewing 4 found footage films this month. Last week we started the month off with Butterfly Kisses, and this week we're going to be talking about Devon's first recommendation for the month, Unfriended. If you've never watched or listened to the podcast, this is simply a podcast where me and my brother try to watch more movies that we haven't seen before. So we aren't necessarily rewatching our favorites or anything like that. Every movie we review on here, at least one of us has never seen before. And each month we do a different theme, with this month being, again, found footage. So, Devin, what was it about Unfriended that made you want to recommend it? Was it one you had seen before or heard about? And what did you first think about the movie?
So no, I've never seen it, and frankly, like it has been for at least one or two movies in this podcast. If it wasn't for the podcast, I probably wouldn't have never put it on. Um, but it has been lingering in my brain. I'd say there was at least somewhat of a chance that I may have watched it, but it is because there was a lot of hype around when it came out, and also it had a sequel. I don't know if it was a direct sequel to the characters and everything, because I hadn't seen it, and I don't even know if there was a third one. I'm not sure, but it did come out a decent time ago, almost a decade ago, in 2014, and I just remember being in school, and it was just like, in not only just in like my grade. I'm trying to think. I think I was like a freshman, but there was people in school talking about it. It was a very our generation type movie to go watch, and I did know a lot of my classmates who went and saw it, and they were hype about it and like freaking out about it for like a week or so. But yeah, I just never got around to watching it because even back in high school, I was an avid movie lover, and I was like, yeah, this movie looks trash. I'm not gonna pay, $25 to go see it. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, but with along with that, I just want to say one more thing is that like I just by looking at the trailer and just knowing what the movie is, I could tell it's obviously a very different take on a POV film.
Yeah, so we addressed it in our first episode, but I'll just say it again here in case you didn't hear the last one. We are being pretty loose with what found footage is considered as. We're basically doing any movie where the movie is footage that someone could have come across. It doesn't have to be a straight up, Blair Witch Project type of found footage. It can really be any kind of movie where the camera and the footage is a part of why the movie is the way it is. So with Unfriended, this is either the first or one of the first, definitely the first mainstream computer screen capture film, this one being a screen capture horror film. And when this movie was coming out, that was literally the entire marketing campaign. The only thing anyone really knew about the film was that it was a horror film where the whole thing was from the perspective of someone's computer screen. And before I go any further, I do want to say, in case it's your first time listening here, we start off completely spoiler-free, and then we give our rating for the movie and whether or not we recommend it, and then we jump into spoilers later on. We'll give a warning before we do that. So if you have not seen Unfriended and you decide you want to watch it after listening to this first part, you can go and then come back and listen to the rest. You're not going to be spoiled here up front. But I will briefly describe the plot, and essentially it's a Skype call among a group of high school friends, and in their school, 1 year ago from the events of the movie, someone in their school, a girl, committed suicide, and events start happening on this anniversary of that death in their Skype call that are obviously supernatural and makes the kids start guessing what exactly is going on. So that's kind of where I'll leave it as far as the plot synopsis. Devin, did you want to read the Rotten Tomatoes consensus and the scores there?
Yeah, so the tomato meters, it has a 62%, which I was actually pretty surprised by. And the audience score, however, is a 36%. The critics' consensus is Unfriended subverts found footage horror cliches to deliver a surprisingly scary entry in the teen slasher genre with a technological twist. I would disagree with the slasher part of it, but
Not really a
it is,
slasher genre. Yeah.
um, but and we'll get more into that heavily in the spoilers. But um, yeah, I would, it's pretty vague. I think is the consensus. What do you think, Josh?
It's definitely vague. I'm also surprised with the fresh rating. Not saying that I'm not going to recommend this movie, but I am surprised with these types of horror movies. You typically see audiences like it more than critics, but it's actually flipped in this case, so that's a bit surprising. As far as the consensus goes, I somewhat agree, but again, it is very vague. It doesn't really say anything about the movie. I guess the only thing I would take issue with is it says it delivers a surprisingly scary entry. There are things about this movie I liked that I'll talk about, but at no point did I think it was scary. So I would disagree with that. But as far as, what we enjoyed about the film, I do really like the screen capture premise and that twist on found footage. My favorite screen capture film has been Searching, which is more of a mystery movie, not horror at all. Devon, I don't know if you've seen that, but that would be, if someone's talking about a screen capture movie, the one I would absolutely recommend. Beyond that, though, haven't seen many of them, and the ones I have seen have just been fine. There was one called Host that came out during the pandemic, which I thought was fine. Probably enjoyed it a little bit more than I enjoyed this film. But with this one in particular, I enjoyed that twist as far as a screen capture element. But really beyond that and the certain clever things they're able to do with that, when it comes to the characters, the plot, the writing, everything else about the movie, did not really care for personally. But when it came to the actual screen capture, I thought they did that well. It looked legitimate. I believed it was a computer screen. It was actually Google. It was actually YouTube and LiveLink and these things. It wasn't generic websites. I actually believed it was someone on their Mac, using Skype. But beyond that, there wasn't much about the actual film itself or its stories that I really liked.
Yeah, the one thing I would point out though is that they're on a Mac, and when they opened iTunes, it said Spotify.
I did not
And
catch
then it
that.
even
I did not catch that.
in their playlist, they had a bunch of playlists, and then at the bottom it just said iTunes. So, anyways, but and they cleverly at the top left hand of their computer screen, it just barely cuts out the Apple logo. Um, but you got to do what you got to do. Um, but for me, I did like, some of the technological things that they were able to do with this movie, such as like lagging and just having, that miscommunication when you're talking to people online, or even just like, hard to get a hold of people. Like they try to call people in the movie and they won't answer, and you're like, when you're trying to call somebody sometimes and they don't answer, you're like, why are you not answering? You know what I mean? Or it's like, what could possibly be going on? So that was definitely there's a couple things there that felt really relatable that I understood.
Yeah, I honestly did not catch that at all about the iTunes Spotify thing. That's interesting. Maybe I can look that up and find it. Because I was actually impressed with how legitimate everything looked. Facebook is another thing that they were using in the movie, and it all looked very legitimate to me. So it's interesting you found something that was maybe not as legitimate. And I was surprised in the sense of how the found footage was pretty real to what found footage of Skype would look like. And even when they watch videos on like YouTube and LiveLeak and stuff, the quality of those videos, the number one thing that takes me out of a found footage movie is when it looks too good, too clean to actually be found footage. And with the 4 movies that we've watched for this month, there are moments in some of the entries where that's the case, where it's like, if this was actually found footage, this is too well shot, or this is too nice of a camera, or the lighting whatever. And a lot of time found footage movies, they'll start off really committing to that style, but then as the movie goes on, they kind of forget about it or don't really worry about it. Unfriended sticks with that shitty quality the entire way, to the point where the climax is, the film is happening, but yet the camera quality is still really shitty. So I appreciated the commitment to the realism on that. And again, when you're doing this type of movie, especially, not just found footage, but a screen capture, you really have to stick to that legitimacy, because that's all you have. If you don't stick to that, your whole movie kind of makes no sense.
Yeah, and one thing on that is just like, with their mics and everything, like they could have had perfectly good mics, but like you're watching this movie and it sounds like you're talking to people online. Um, and so I liked that, and they didn't go as deep to like make it like very, hard on the ears or anything like that. I think they found a good middle point there, but the other thing that actually has like two parts I want to point out is like, especially with this, it's very reliant on like seeming like it's one shot. You know what I mean? And it's, even though they're just in their room or whatever it is, so there's not much continuity to it. They did do a pretty good job with continuity. I was able to find, just like see one continuity error, and it was in when one of the people was messaging, like texting or whatever you call it, online with somebody, and they had their conversation, and they like went back to like another shot, and then they pulled up their little conversation window again, and it was a different, like some of the text was missing, and then they went back and they came back to it again, and the rest, and it was like back to normal.
Interesting.
And I was like, you know and I'm like, for one, I'm like, how do you even do that? Like, I don't
Yeah.
understand how you even shoot it like that. But on the other, I didn't really care about it too much.
Yeah, you really had a keen eye when it came to the screen capture, much more than me. I was trying but failing to get invested in the actual movie. You were very much trying to find those mistakes, it seems like. So, moving past that, moving past the screen capture and the genre part of it, I think we've talked, pretty at length about how it fits in the found footage genre. But the movie itself, I've already said that I didn't really like any elements of the plotter characters. I don't want to just leave it at that. So to explain a little further, I think all the characters are extremely thin outside of the main character, and even the main character, who you get to learn a little bit more about than the other people, you still don't really understand her motivations for things. There are things that are revealed in the movie that kind of go against everything we know about this character so far, and there's no explanation of, well, this is why she did this, or this is why she acted that way. It just kind of is shown to you, and then you just have to react to it. It's the character of Blair, who is played by Shelley Hennig. Probably the best performance in the movie. She is the protagonist, but really the only one that even had an opportunity to really give a real performance. But there also were some times where even she was overacting, screaming into her computer mic, unnecessarily. And some crazy things happen in the movie. I get that these people would be scared, these teenagers would be scared or angry in some parts, but almost everyone in the film, I think, was overacting almost the whole time. She, I thought, kept it together for the most part, but even she kind of crossed that line a few times of being ridiculous. And I think that also falls on the direction. You have to be able to tell the actors, when they're overdoing it or when you need it, to be a little bit more realistic. So I don't fully just blame the actors on that. And then as far as the plot itself, I just had no interest. At no point did it seem real or realistic. The things that this supernatural entity is able to do in the movie is never explained. It makes no sense. It follows the very typical ghosts can do whatever they want, that a lot of bad horror movies have. So that's why it really took me out of it, because if I don't believe it, then what's the point? And there was actually a certain way that I thought they might be going, that if it did end this way, I'll talk about this in the spoiler section, I would have enjoyed this movie a lot more. It doesn't go that route. It sticks to the straight supernatural horror route, so it just wasn't really for me.
Yeah, one thing I want to say on the characters was, I believe it was William Pelt's character, Adam. Um, I can't really, I don't know how to explain really what role he had in the movie, but I did feel like he really was like really laid back. I mean, I believe he was like drinking during like the night of that Skype call and stuff, but at the same time, it just didn't seem like he was giving that much effort at all, just into his character and whatnot, and that really didn't, I didn't really care for him that much. And then on the other hand, you have Jacob Wasaki playing Ken, and I guess you could say he was. I'm not saying you're saying this, but if you are, you could say he was like maybe overacting a bit, but at the same time, I kind of bought his character. Like the kind of energized, like being a dick to the girls or and just everyone there, trying to be the jokester and stuff. I bought that as his character. Um, but and then yeah, Shelley Henning, who plays the main character Blair, I think did the best job. Clearly,
Yeah, I think that for Ken's character, he's not a huge part of the movie, so I didn't really have a big problem with him. I agree that actor did perform that well. So I guess I take back a little bit of what I said if I thought every actor overacted. I thought he was fine. He just wasn't a very big part of the movie, and at no point did I really even care about his character. As soon as he was introduced, I knew exactly what he was and what his purpose was in the movie. So it was just kind of like, out of all of these characters, he was the least important, I guess, to me, I would say. But I would agree that for the small, limited role he had, his performance was good. I'm more so talking about, the main ones I'd be talking about would be Moses Jacob Storm, who plays Mitch, the boyfriend, Will Peltz, who plays the friend you were talking about, Adam, and then Renee Olstead, who plays Jess. Those three main ones, excuse me, that were on the call were the three that I felt were just overacting essentially the whole time. And then Blair was all right for some parts and some parts not so much. So that was my takeaway from it. You mentioned how it all felt like one take. It did, but then also at times there were moments just with their acting and their performances that I could tell it was different takes, because you'd have a character who's like, they're not doing anything in this scene in the Skype call, so they're just like standing there like listening to what's going on, and then seconds later when they're involved in something, let's say something makes them angry or whatever, they're instantly like screaming, or they're like fuck, whatever, and they're screaming. It's like, you wouldn't just instantly flip a switch like that if this was a constant stream, a constant one take. It would take you a little bit to get to that point. And then the opposite of that, there are characters that are screaming, throwing stuff, whatever, and then someone else starts talking and you just see their character again, kind of just sitting in the Skype window, not really doing anything. So we'll get into much more, I'm sure, in the spoilers to be more specific, but other than the gimmick working for the most part, there really wasn't anything I enjoyed about the film, and it's definitely not one that I would recommend. However, I will say, when you named, because I knew of this movie, I had never watched it, but I knew of it, and I've actively avoided it. And when you brought it up and chose it, I'm never going to deny a movie that you choose, and vice versa. So when you chose it, I'm like, okay, I'll watch it. I expected this thing to be a 1 or a 2 out of 10, and I was ready to watch it and come on here and bury it. The movie did prove why you shouldn't have any expectations going in, because while it wasn't good and I wouldn't recommend it, it surprised me at how mediocre it was, like how forgettable and just not terrible it was. So in some ways, I guess that's impressive, but that's a very low bar. But I would give the film a 3 out of 10. It's not one that I really enjoyed or would watch again, but for it being such a new gimmick with the screen capture and doing it well, for the most part, in my opinion, I would have hats off for that. So that bumps up the score a little bit for me.
yeah, for me, I didn't find anything scary or chilling about the movie at all, and it really sucks because as watching the movie, I was like, they could do this here, or they could do this here to just like, they could do whatever they want. It's their movie, and they just chose for some reason to like make it almost as realistic as possible, which just really like brought it down a lot for me. And then, but not only that, and then like, you know, I'm trying to figure out how to explain it, but like when you're watching a movie, even if it's like POV or something, you're kind of distracted by the faulty camera work, the little like things that they're doing when it's not like a main scene or anything. But with this movie, it's just like a very low wave pace that it goes at, and you can't do anything but just watch their screen. That's all you have to do. So whatever they're doing, I'm literally like for 5 minutes at a time, I'm just looking at their mouse, like seeing where their mouse is going, not making any sense. And but it's like the only thing I have to do is watch their mouse because that's literally the only thing going on, or them typing or whatever they're doing. Uh, so it was very boring. The only reason I could give this movie a rating really is because of the concept. They gave it a try, E for effort, and like you said, it wasn't. You know, I didn't have to turn it off because I was literally bored out of my mind. So I'm gonna go ahead and give it a 2 out of 10.
All right, I think this might be the lowest rated movie so far we've reviewed. There are so many worse movies out there. I just think that, for the format of this podcast and how we do things, the fact that we don't purposely look for good or bad movies necessarily, it would be tough for us to come across an extremely bad movie without purposely doing so. If we were having a month of, hey, let's review movies that have a 0% on Rotten Tomatoes or something, we're going to be purposely watching bad movies. But without doing that, with randomly picking movies from themes that we think of, I think this is about as bad as it could get. But that's also a good thing because it lets me know, like, hey, it's, whatever movies we choose, they probably will be watchable. So we are going to jump into spoilers at this time. So if you haven't seen Unfriended and despite our non-recommendations want to watch it, it is on Netflix in the US. I'm sure you can find it elsewhere as well, and then you can come back and listen to the rest of this podcast. If you've already seen the film or you just don't care, then you can go ahead and keep watching or listening as well. So what's the first thing that you would want to bring up, Devon, in terms of spoiler details about the movie?
So the first thing I want to bring up, and it directly relates with my score on it and how I feel about the movie, is that one of the last things I said was I felt like there was chances in the movie where I was watching it where I was like they could just throw this ghost character, this uh, you know like evil spirit or whatever it was, just throw it into the movie already. God damn it! Like just use it. It's your one thing that this movie is about. Just use it. And I felt like they did not use it at all. Like the ghost is texting you. That doesn't scare me. And that was like that's all they did at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, what happens, like they have like the spirit somehow possesses them and has them like hurt themselves or kill themselves. But it's like even when that happens, the movie is rated R. At least show it. At least make it gruesome enough. But no, you're gonna like not show them do anything because it's lagging, and it's like I was like why are you doing this? Like you're literally like teasing me with the entertainment. Like this movie is supposed to be entertaining, and then you're gonna like lag out the entertaining part, and then I was just like, dude, what are you doing? And then they literally like it's like they were teasing me the whole time and then just gave me a big middle finger at the end of the movie when the ghost actually shows up at the last second. And I'm like, okay, cool, bye. Like the movie's over. I'm already like throwing my popcorn out.
Yeah, I praised the realism earlier, but even I'll admit, it was frustrating when things did finally start to get going. People were dying, things were getting more intense, that the lag was still there, and it was like so bad that you really couldn't see what was going on a lot of the time. And I think that sometimes they did that on purpose to avoid having to show things for budgetary reasons or whatever. The film was rated R, so it's not like they were trying to hide any violence. But yeah, that was definitely annoying as well. The friend Ken, the chubby kid, he just dies. It just shows him like putting his hand in a blender, and then I guess he's just dead. There are some characters where like I think Val, that girl that joins the call, her computer just like freezes and then she has a seizure or something. Like it's never really clear. The only death that I felt worked was Adam, when he pulls out the gun and he's drunk and he's messing around, and then the ghost prints out for him saying, if you reveal this note, Blair dies, and then Blair gets a note from the ghost saying, if you reveal this note, Adam dies, and the ghost basically forces one of them, and Blair reveals it so that, basically saving Mitch. I think the ghost was going to kill Mitch if no one did anything, and she saves Mitch, but Adam shoots himself. That was the one death that I felt, at least that has a premise that for the situation that they're in this Skype call, it makes sense, and I bought into it. It wasn't executed the best way, and it still doesn't really make sense logic-wise as far as how is the ghost printing out these, Microsoft Word sheets, but, at least that kind of worked. If they can
possess people, I'm sure they can. I'm sure they could do that.
There's something about ghosts doing normal everyday things that's almost more unbelievable than like a poltergeist, or you know what I mean, like a ghost throwing stuff around your house or a ghost possessing you. Like that more so makes sense to me when I'm watching a horror movie, but like a ghost messaging you on Facebook or posting a bad video of you or something, there's just something about it that's like, okay, if ghosts were real, and I'm like suspending my disbelief to say, okay, ghosts are real, why do they know how to do that? Like, is it because it's the ghost of this girl and this girl knew how to use Facebook? Like, I don't know. I really didn't buy it.
Yeah, it brings me back to this. I believe it was an Aziz Ansari joke where he was like, if ghosts were real, they would just be like, you would just see them in the corner of your living room, and they'd be like, yo, what's the Wi-Fi password?
Yes, yeah, great joke. Yeah, absolutely. That's funny. What I said.
Oh shit.
What I said earlier, though, when I was like, a way it could have gone, a part of me really started to think that everything was orchestrated by Mitch. Now, it doesn't really make sense, and it breaks down because, okay, how would Mitch possess these friends to kill themselves? He couldn't. So in my mind, I started formulating like, what if Mitch, what if the seizure thing with Val was truly just a coincidence, like she had a seizure, because she wasn't originally on their call. So if Mitch is the one behind it, maybe he didn't even plan for her to be on the call, and then she joins and he has a seizure and goes to the hospital. And then with Ken, maybe he actually somehow killed Ken or whatever. It starts to fall apart, obviously, as the film goes on. But there was a moment where Mitch was acting a certain way and things were getting revealed, like when it's revealed that Blair cheated on him with Adam. It started to enter my mind of, like, maybe he already knew that, and, like, he's the one on the account for the girl that killed herself. Her name escapes me right now. I'll look it up. But Laura Barnes, that's it. Maybe he is on the account because they even kept bringing it up where Blair would message Mitch and be like, is this you? Stop messing with me. And he's like, no, it's not. So they were teasing it even. Obviously, that doesn't end up working with where the film goes. But in my mind, for a few minutes, I thought, if they go this way and pull it off to where it makes sense, kudos to this film. Like, no, it's not a supernatural ghost. It's this kid who's taking his revenge on all of these people. Maybe he even loved Laura Barnes or something. Who knows? But that ended up not being the case. If I wrote the film, that's what I would have tried to do. But I'm, that's not what happened.
That's the other thing. I don't want to. I'm trying to think of the word. I don't want to sound like too superficial or anything. I don't know if that's the right word, but like, if they just had, like, sometimes I feel like with some movies, it's like they just had like 5 other people in the writing room, like, and one of us, like, duplicates of one of us, and just like, yeah, you should just like try to make the movie a twist on like Mitch is actually behind everything, and they're like, actually, that would probably be a lot easier to to film and everything, and maybe we could still have some like crazy gruesome stuff like the blender and stuff like that, but like still like that would work a lot better than the end of the movie just being like, oh no, it was a ghost like possessing people, and it would like be a huge reveal of like Mitch knew he already knew all this, he had dirt on everyone and stuff, and like and whatever it was, and then like maybe Mitch ends up dying or something still, but yeah, I just think sometimes with these movies, it's like it's like they make a rough draft and they don't revise it at all.
Yeah, Yeah, and you said that with, I forget what movie it was, but you said that with another movie recently, and that is something that I feel like does happen sometimes with movies where, I mean, we know that that's not the case. Like, we know that they revise it and whatnot, but it is weird that when a film has one writer, or it could have multiple writers, I guess it really doesn't matter, but when a film's writers don't, it doesn't feel like they cleaned up the script, it's like, you're making a movie. Like, how do you not, like, how do you not make sure that it makes
Or
sense?
it's like even if people brought up like those other things, like, yeah, it could be like Mitch behind the whole thing, or another person says like, let's really go deep into this like ghost like character and everything, but this dude's like, no, I have a vision, it needs to be exactly like this, and
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like
Who knows? I mean, and also
but
there's also the Hollywood side of it. I don't, obviously we're not on the inside there, but just from what I've heard and things, like, obviously there's a process of maybe there was stuff in the script that was taken out because it didn't fit what the studio wanted, or whatever the case was. We don't know what happens in those rooms. Not to say that this is a beloved movie, but obviously we're a little bit in the minority considering it has a fresh rating. Also, its budget was only $1 million, and it made $64 million at the box office. That's the thing about horror films, especially, is if you could have just a decent marketing campaign, doesn't even have to be good, just decent, and you have a low-budget horror movie, you will make money. I mean, that's literally how, like, Blumhouse and Jason Blum, like, has a career. Like, literally, make a shitty horror movie or a somewhat decent horror movie, have a good marketing campaign, and spend no money on it, and people will come see it. And, yeah, you're not making $500 million, but you're only spending $1 million. So even with advertising and everything, you're coming away with $60 million profit. That's huge.
and while we're on the topic with just like a shitty movie like this, is like, do you think, this is just off the top of my head, but do you think maybe like the POV, found footage genre maybe has something to do, like has a little role to play in horror movies not being like great quality movies? Like, there are definitely like plenty of good like horror movies that come out here and there, but when we're talking in the grand scheme of things, like the horror genre for the last 10, maybe 20 years, like, is in quality and just like, theatrical and everything, is on a lower rank, when it's like, back in the day you had Evil Dead and stuff like that, where it's like those were like blockbuster films. Like the first like Halloween, or I think Halloween was a cult classic. That was before my time, but still, you have these like horror movies that have come out, in the past, that are blockbuster films. Like a lot of like blockbuster films and everything from back in the day are horror movies, because people, that horror genre is a very enticing, entertaining like genre of movie. Do you want to go see a rom com, or do you want to see a horror movie? A lot of people are probably going to see a horror movie, no matter if it's, you know, uh, one of the best like rom coms of the past decade and one of the shittiest horror movies that's come out in the past decade. Um, but sorry to go on, but I did ask you a question. Do you think the POV genre has anything to do with that?
I think that, sure. I mean, it plays a part. I mean, it gives filmmakers or Hollywood, or however you want to phrase it, it gives them a method to make a cheap horror movie. And they kind of even talk about it in the film Butterfly Kisses that we reviewed last week. It gives them like a way to make a cheap movie but have an excuse for it. With that being said, I could talk a lot about the horror genre, because I have a lot of thoughts about it. I love horror movies. I'm not going to go out and say it's my favorite genre. I really don't know what my favorite genre is, but I love horror movies. And, in the era that we're in today, because it really depends on what era are you in, right? In the era that we're in today, there's really two types of horror movies. There are more underground or independent, or what some people call elevated horror, where it uses the horror genre to make a story about something else. Just like off the top of my head, like Hereditary is my favorite horror movie, modern horror movie. It's really about trauma and grief, but it uses the horror genre to tell that story. And you could do that with anything. You could do it with drug addiction, abusive relationships. This film tries to do it with bullying to an extent, but I don't think it does it well at all. But you can do
Or
that.
like the Jordan Peele's Get Out. That was
Exactly.
a very
Yeah, systematic racism.
metaphorical movie.
Yeah, systematic racism. You can do it with basically anything. But you can't really do that with other genres, because if you try to do that with a comedy, if you're making a comedy but you want to tell a story about trauma, you're going to end up just making a drama, like a comedic drama. You know what I mean? It's hard to do it with other film genres. Horror works really well with that. And a lot of those are the movies that I like if they do it well. However, there's also what I would term, and what other people have called it, I'm not the first one, but more of a fast food horror, where people in Hollywood or filmmakers or whoever use the horror genre to make money. Which, first of all, every movie for the most part is to make money. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. But especially the horror genre is, how do we use the basic, typical horror tropes to make money in a movie that we don't have to put much effort into, And you see a lot of these films come out where it's bad and it doesn't look like there's much effort in or much love or anything from the people who made it. And it really feels like they just want to make money. And
an industry movie.
Yeah, and Unfriended kind of felt like that, even though it was only $1 million, basically an independent film. It felt like that to me, and I'm not saying that all of those movies are bad either. So, like, for example, I love the first two Conjuring movies. Those are basically fast food horror movies. Like, they're not trying to tell a deeper story. I mean, I would argue Conjuring 2 is kind of a romance love story with Ed and Lorraine Warren, and really dives deep into their relationship. But beyond that, it's a movie about spirits and ghosts and like a couple trying to fight them. Like that's all it really is. But it's done really well. So you can even, Annabelle, the third Annabelle movie is that, it feels like the third Annabelle movie basically feels like a haunted house attraction in a movie. It's not trying to be anything special. But you can do it well. But sometimes it comes off just disingenuous and kind of icky. Like, when I watch a movie where I feel like there's no actual integrity, it just wants to make money, I feel icky watching it. So I guess that's not really answering your question, but without having to dive into a huge discussion about it, that's what I would say. But does found footage play a part? Yeah, absolutely. I think if I had to name one culprit, I actually would blame Paranormal Activity. I wouldn't blame Blair Witch Project. I mean, Blair Witch Project came out and was a huge hit, but there wasn't a huge burst of found footage after that. Like, it still wasn't really anywhere. Paranormal Activity came out. It was made for, I think, like $4, and it made a shit ton of money. And then, like, everyone was like, we got to make found footage horror right now. So then the next decade was just full of them.
Yeah, and you gotta respect like Scary Movie for trying to make fun of them, but sadly, at least it seemed like to me, like after like the third or fourth Scary Movie, they just seemed like industry plants, like industry.
Yeah, well, there's
like,
there's actually a funny story about that. Just real quick, I just learned this recently. There was like I don't even know the story, so I'm not going to try to butcher it, but the long story short, there were two people that somehow got a writing credit on Scary Movie, the original, even though they had nothing to do with the movie. Like, they sued them because they thought they stole their idea or something from like a short film or something, so they got a writing credit, and then they went around in Hollywood saying, we wrote Scary Movie, give us money to make another spoof movie. So now there's all of these spoof movies that say from the writers of Scary Movie, and they had nothing to do with Scary Movie. So that's why there's so many bad ones out there. But those kind of died off too. But I just thought that was a really funny story I just learned recently.
Well, as far as spoilers go, I don't think there's really any more spoilers for this movie.
Yeah, there's a ghost. There's a ghost and it kills people. It kills the teenagers. That's it. And if this ghost was just going to kill all of them, what's even the point? Like, what's even the point of the ghost going through all of that if the ghost knows, hey, I'm just going to kill all these people in the next 90 minutes? Like, why put them through all that?
Yeah, not very sure. Well, we hope you enjoyed listening to this episode of Watch More Movies. And as always, we hope we inspired you to watch more movies as well. We're going to be doing 2 more movies this month for the POV horror genre, or just POV found footage genre. And the next one, I believe, is The Bay. So if you want to follow us for updates and or just follow us to see how we're doing, give us some support, you can find me on Twitter at Devon Smile and on TikTok at day.von. And what about you, Josh?
You can find me at TikTok at Josh Movie Guy. If you're listening to this podcast, then you can watch it on YouTube, Watch More Movies Podcast YouTube channel. If you're watching this on YouTube and you don't really watch the video part, you can always listen to it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. Beyond that, I think that's really about it.
All right, well, thanks for watching and tune in next time.